The floor is yours, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for your testimony this morning. General Graham, let me start with you. The Howard Hansen Dam project is to address dam safety issues, provide additional water supply, and meet the Corps' legal obligations by opening up miles of critical salmon habitat. Would you agree with that assessment?
Ranking Member Murray, yes. The Howard Hansen project right now is the one we're working on is primarily a fish passage to figure out how to get small juvenile fish off of a high head dam, which we've never done before. But it's part of a larger project that provides, as you said, critical flood risk management and water supply protection to the southeastern part of Seattle.
Is it true that the $500 million the project was slated to receive in the FY25 budget, as well as in the House and Senate bills, would have allowed construction to proceed on schedule?
Yes, that would have allowed us to keep on our current construction schedule.
Yeah, well, it's clear that the Howard Hansen Dam project is shovel-ready, and despite that, the Trump administration seems ready to walk away from that. Everyone needs to understand turning the Army Corps into a political slush fund sets a very dangerous precedent. In fact, in testimony before the House, a top Army Corps official very explicitly stated that OMB, not the experts at the Corps, called the final shots here. Section 107 has been passed on a bipartisan basis in our bill for the last 5 years and makes clear that funding should be allocated only to projects determined to be eligible by the Chief of Engineers. It appears that OMB handed the Corps the final spend plan without consulting you as required. The law needs to be followed, so I'm going to ask you, yes or no, were you provided a final spend plan so you could determine all the projects listed were eligible?
Ranking Member Murray, we provided our best technical recommendation to the Assistant Secretary.
Senator Murray, we provided input through the president's budget process on that spending plan. We provided technical input on that spending plan.
So that you could prove that all of them were eligible, correct?
I don't think eligibility was ever the question.
Okay, well that's really troubling and really an example of this administration that just somehow thinks they're above the law. I mean, I got news for Russ Vought. The law applies to him the same as for everybody else, so that is very troubling. Mr. Forsgren, let me go back to you. I consistently hear from ports and harbors across the country about how they rely on the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to maintain critical port infrastructure. Now, in April, the administration issued an executive order acknowledging that cargo carriers divert goods to Canada from our donor ports, Seattle, Tacoma, others, to avoid the harbor maintenance tax. That's really an unfair practice. I've spoken about it for years. But this year's budget request does not even attempt to meet the worded targets for HMTF donor port funding. And even more troubling, in the skinny budget, this administration tries to tell Congress that it is not a federal responsibility to provide those dollars, even though that is one of the explicit purposes Congress passed into law. That is really unacceptable. Donor port funding has already been determined through the Worder process and our annual appropriations bills for years. It is extremely frustrating that I have to continue raising this issue year after year to get our ports the fair share they are entitled to under the law. Will you commit to ensure that donor ports like Seattle and Tacoma will receive their full fair share of the HMTF dollars as Congress intended?
Senator, I will commit to working to ensure that the Harbor Maintenance Fund is used to the maximum extent it possibly can. We understand the Harbor Maintenance Fund is the backbone of the commercial navigation system for our ports, and that system has to be able to be functional across all the nation's ports. But I will say there needs to be a primary focus on the principal federal responsibility, which is the mainline channels. But I will commit to working with you to fully utilize the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund as it is passed into law.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one more question in my last few seconds. The Columbia River provides habitat for salmon, endangered species. It also irrigates 600,000 acres of farmland and serves as a marine highway. It also provides electricity to the entire Northwest. And critically, it has a transboundary waterway shared with Canada. So the State Department has been leading efforts to negotiate a modernized Columbia River Treaty, which is really critical to providing certainty for people and businesses across our region who rely on the Columbia River. But this administration appears committed to doing everything they can now to tank our relationship with our friend and neighbor Canada. And the key to getting this agreement in place and all the hard work that has gone into it was collaboration between all the stakeholders. It is really imperative that as the interim agreement is executed, that collaboration continues. So, Mr. Cameron, Mr. Forsgren, will you commit to ensuring that the Corps and the Reclamation continue to communicate with tribes and the Mid-Sea public utilities on the operation of the Columbia River system?
Senator Murray, we certainly we are committed to the treaty, as is reflected in the budget, and we are committed to continuing the dialogue necessary to operate and maintain the system.
Mr. Cameron.
Yes, Senator. I've already had multiple meetings with stakeholders from throughout the Columbia River Basin, so we're including tribes. So, conversations are ongoing.
Okay, this is really a critical treaty. We need to get it enacted. And again, Canada is not our enemy there. We need to include them. Thank you.
Senator